Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjanaya Jamuna Tira Vanachariyam Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjanaya Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjanaya Jamuna Tira Vanachariyam Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravijacharya Storo Shishimat His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravijacharya Storo Shishimat His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Ananti Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Silaridas Thakur Ki Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Siva Sari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Sisi Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Vrindavan Navadip Dham Ki Ganga Mai Jamuna Mai Ki Bhakti Devi Tulasi Devi Ki Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So today we'll be reading from the Transcendental Diary. I'll paraphrase a lot and read here and there some points. We can have a discussion. This is by Hari Sori Prabhu. We're beginning from the November 30th, 1975. So Srila Prabhupada was on the roof taking his massage. And after that, and he was reading Srimad Bhagavatam. So expressed his appreciation for the newly printed volume of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which was the 5th canto. And there was Hansadutta, and Prabhupada was chatting with him. And Prabhupada was saying that these were like for the Raja Rishis, for the kings and sages. And their capital was India. It was around that winter time, but the days were warm and sunny and very pleasant. And commenting on the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada said that when the 5th canto comes out, some people will leave the movement because it's not in keeping with their understanding from their material education or university education, especially in terms of the planetary systems and how it is structured and situated. So Hansadutta asked Prabhupada about opening a center in Kabul, because he said there were many young residents or young Westerners that would pass through the area. So he thought it wise enough to open a center. So he was seeking the approval of Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said that his desire was to see a center in every part of the world. And he encouraged Hansadutta, his disciple, to go ahead and establish. Then subsequently, Gopal Krishna Maharaj arrived, and he was making arrangements to go to Kurukshetra, where the Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Lord Krishna. And when he asked who would accompany him, then Prabhupada, kind of upward, put his head. In India, it's very common. They move the head upward and like that. And indicated to Hari Suri Prabhu will join him. Because he needed somebody to give his massage also. Taking that into consideration, he felt very happy. So actually his tenure as the servant had come to more or less to an end, but he was happy now that it was extended. So that is what is transpiring here. But then, initially, when I was giving a talk previously about Hari Suri Prabhu and his massaging Prabhupada, and at some point they had to put the immersion heater on in a bucket. Actually, it's placed in a bucket, and he put it on halfway down the massage, and he forgot it the last time. Initially, the first time, he forgotten it. And this is the second time that he forgets putting that immersion heater on. But this time, Srila Prabhupada was exasperated and reprimanded him because he had to wait for the water to heat up. So he had no excuse and he felt terrible. but the realization that Hari Suri Prabhu got from it was that he could understand that, Prabhupada was tolerant to mistakes from inexperience, but he expects us to learn from those errors. It's not that, we make errors. The other day I commented on Ganga Mata was giving the talk, and I commented that it's not all Krishna's mercy that you can just make mistakes and do what you like and say, well, it's Krishna's mercy. Like a disciple had, a devotee put some salt in the Charnamrita, and Prabhupada was very angry about it. But then, so some devotees say, well, it's Krishna's mercy, and she said so. Well, it's Krishna's mercy to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, it's not Krishna's mercy, it's your stupidity. So, and the girl was giggling, So when somebody is reprimanded or chastised, there's a sense of remorse in the person. That should be like the whole mood. Otherwise, the correction doesn't take place and it doesn't have effect. Anyway, he learned that. And Prabhupada, he said, wanted us to act with clear intelligence. That's what he wanted. So then, after that, he takes his lunch prasadam and he, as he says, he sat in his sitting room for a short while. And then Prabhupada was walking to the servant's room, to his bedroom, to retire for his afternoon nap. There was Hansaduta, Harikesh, and Harisori Prabhu was in the room, and they were taking their lunch also. As he came in, and it's natural for them, they offered obeisances, and Harisori Prabhu was sitting on the floor eating from a bowl with a spoon. And as he knelt back, he put the spoon down and then he rested his hand on his knees. So immediately Prabhupada looked, because the etiquette is not like, to touch your knee, or especially when you're eating, and looked at him and said, oh, you are eating, and then said, then Prabhupada was demonstrating, he put his hands on various places to illustrate like a child, is contaminating his clothes. That's how he was doing it. Prabhupada was very expert with a dirty hand. So he was like showing him how a child would contaminate his clothes after eating. But he, his instinct told him that, well, my hand isn't dirty because he's eating with a spoon. But then he checked himself, because he knew that Prabhupada had a better understanding of cleanliness. So he laughed and he walked past and he shook his head and said, you're all brought up by militias. You know what it means. You probably heard this term. And this was one instance. Then in the evening again, without washing his hands, if you're serving somebody and he was serving, he picked up the jug after handling Srila Prabhupada's plate. So when he picked up the plate, the hand is contaminated. So when he picked up the jug, the water is also contaminated. So again, he kind of made that mistake, but Srila Prabhupada laughed and corrected him. And then he pointed out this is a position of a guru to correct the disciple when he makes some mistakes. But there is something that I was just thinking about before I came to the class here, to the temple room, about half an hour, maybe 45 minutes ago. And I was thinking how to correct. That's also a science itself. There's an instance in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of Damodar Pandit, who was a great follower of Lord Chaitanya, a very staunch follower. But he was somewhat offensive or critical in a way. Like Lord Chaitanya was very attracted or attached to a boy who was a son of a widow. So he was kind of saying that, he was correcting Lord Chaitanya that you're associating with this boy, it may not be very good because, it may indicate that he's getting closer to the widow. That was the underlying intention. But then Lord Chaitanya was upset with Damodar Pandit. Because Damodar Pandit, he was, he should known the position of Lord Chaitanya. But he was correcting, and Lord Chaitanya kind of reprimanded him in a way. What he really did, he sent him away. That's what he did. But within that criticism, you may show so much concern in the person, but within that concern, there's criticism. So that you have to be careful of also. We all have to be careful of when we're trying to show some affection to somebody, but at the same time, there may be a criticism involved. Like it reminds me, one person came and told Srila Prabhupada, one of his disciples, I'm happy I left Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada said, we are also happy. We don't have to see your morose face anymore. So he asked him to leave. Now cleanliness, there's so many examples I can speak about. The one I thought of was Mother Yamuna when she came for her sister's wedding, and Prabhupada engaged in cooking. And it was hot in the afternoon and she was perspiring. And she said, Swamiji, may I have a glass of water? And he pecked his head out around the door and said, go wash your hands. So he constantly, and a couple of times he did that. And he said that while preparing for Krishna, you must know that you're preparing for the Supreme Lord. And one should not think of eating, drinking, or anything when one is cooking for Krishna. And once she drank the water, she washed her hands. And then a couple of times like that. And he was actually teaching how to make kachoris. But at one, it was so hot, and sometimes, you kind of wipe your hand on your forehead. And she did that. And he noticed that, go wash your hand. So cleanliness, is important. But how we apply it and others is also, we must practice it ourselves first. If you're in a position to correct, and that's another thing, but don't be too judgmental. Just like once, a group of devotees went to India, and then they should stay at wealthy people's home for engagements. Then they went to a nearby village, which was a local Krishna temple, and the altar was very dirty and the pujari was wild. They have, his front teeth was missing. During the arti, he offered the items very quickly, like that. And then he offered the water and he threw it on the faces. So like that, he did like that. And then, the disciple, Nandakumar Prabhu, he said, Prabhupada, I have a question. He said, ask me later. Because he knew it was something to do with, this person. Because, and then he asked, he said, I was wondering if Krishna was really there. But Prabhupada said, our standard is cleanliness, you keep that standard, but don't judge anybody else by what they do. That's a good way of looking at it. He was a pujari and his heart was for Krishna, and Prabhupada saw differently. So sometimes we may go to India and we may go to these places, and quite often Westerners feel that, like Vrindavan is unclean and make so many comments of pujaris. It's best not to do that. You just walk through the temples and just pay respects and leave. You're not obliged to go there. Even Prabhupada commented that people's, dhotis sometimes will look brown in India. You notice? Because the soil enters the water and they wash it. But you may not know that. So don't judge them on the basis of that in cleanliness. There's so many things in Vrindavan, how Prabhupada is very what do you would say? The word, somebody who's he's very detailed. He sees, he's very concerned of how his room is set, how it's cleaned. Very, very much detailed. And there was a devotee who should clean Prabhupada's room, was Devi Shakti. And one day she engaged another devotee who wanted to clean, was Mula Prakriti. It was a very good devotee. She left her body with cancer. And Devi Shakti told her exactly how to clean the temple. To clean the room. And somehow, she misplaced the water. And when Prabhupada walked in, he noticed that. Immediately he noticed that. And he was not happy that because, however he said it, it should be like that. So he was concerned. And so his standard of cleanliness was high, and he noticed that the glass of water wasn't in the proper place, and a silver lid for the glass was not dusted. Like if you serve Giriraj Maharaj, it was very clean for us, and then all of a sudden, after you finish, he'll say, he'll look at you, just pick it up like that. You haven't cleaned yet. You have to start cleaning. So you start all over again. So the cleanliness, has to be there. Another thing was, there was another devotee called Adideva who was in Mayapur, and he was meant to make sandalwood paste to put on the forehead, before the class in the morning. And he was really proud of his service. But then, so Prabhupada uttered a couple of times, but the person didn't get it, the devotee didn't get it. And then the servant told, Prabhupada said, you should use your right hand. The devotee was left-handed. I was really lost, and I was really thinking of you. So it's like that. But this is about cleanliness. There's so many things can be said. But anyway, moving ahead on after washing the hands and correction, then I'll just read this paragraph. It was simultaneously embarrassing and pleasurable to be on the receiving end of Prabhupada's reproof. His standard of purity is so much higher than ours. By his keen observation and objective criticism, he is training us to the highest level, making us fit for serving Krishna. I feel very fortunate that Prabhupada is very patiently training me, even though he sometimes calls us malicious. He is actually very proud of his Western disciples. He constantly points out to his visitors how we have been transformed. So yes, Prabhupada was very proud of his disciples, and he would point from time to time. In Bhaktivedanta Manna, in the lawn there, he was with some Indian guests. And then Shrutikirti Prabhu was reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Prabhupada was pointing, saying, see how this boy is reading, his pronunciation of the Bengali is so good. He was appreciating him. So, also in 1975 in Australia, Shrutikirti Prabhu also recalls of how, there were many Indian guests, and Prabhupada was pointing to this, how good these devotees are. and Prabhupada was speaking on the subject matter of probably Varnashram or the classes of human beings. And he was talking about how everybody is fourth class. And there was a professor there and said, "You also fourth class." He told the professor, "You're fourth class also." And the professor was, "Okay, well, what can I do?" The professor responded. And then Prabhupada said, he pointed to two of his disciples. One was Paramahamsa, I think it was a Swami at that time, and Shrutikirti Prabhu, and said, "You have to become like my disciples from your fourth class." So, it's very interesting how Prabhupada saw how he corrected people, how he did things, was amazing. Sisi Raghunath ki. So Prabhupada was definitely training them. Although they, just one point, although they were just young devotees, they never felt they were pure devotees, but still Prabhupada used them as an example of showing that how good they're doing, they have transformed by the process of Krishna consciousness. So then these incidents that made Hari Sori Prabhu think of the unlimited patience in training his disciple. Because he would say the same things again and again to any new disciple, provided the student had an humble attitude and was eager to learn. So that is how a teacher is. A teacher can repeat 100 times the same instruction as long as the person wants to learn. So he learned that from Prabhupada. Now there's two aspects to these few pastimes that we have discussed, and now we're moving on we'll be moving on to December 1st, 1975. So at this point, Srila Prabhupada's schedule to go to Kurukshetra has been confirmed, and Gopal Krishna Maharaj informed Harisuri Prabhu that he had to go to Calcutta and help there. So he was sad to leave Prabhupada's association, and then Prabhupada goes to Kurukshetra the next day on 1st of December 1975. Now this is what our discussion is about on Kurukshetra. So I'll just read the first paragraph and I'll just paraphrase the others. At morning's first light, Srila Prabhupada and his party set out in 2 cars for the famous theatre of Kurukshetra, the site where Lord Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna some 5,000 years ago. Prabhupada rode in the first car with Harikesh, Gopal Krishna and Hansaduta Prabhu, Chaitya Guru and Ambarish. Oh, anyway, Harisori was still there, it seemed like. And I brought up the rear. Leaving New Delhi, we drove due north for about 3 hours to reach our destination. Kurukshetra is still a popular place of pilgrimage, as it was even thousands of years before Lord Krishna's appearance. It was a small town, but there are many temples. Every year, especially during an eclipse of the sun or moon, millions of pilgrims gather to bathe in large lakes and to visit the site of the famous battle between the Pandavas and the Kurus. So there was a gentleman there, his name was Nanda, Guzar Lal Nanda. He received Prabhupada at a nearby guest house, and they took breakfast. And this Nandaji took him on a tour to the area was known as Brahma Sarova. So Prabhupada was touring, and the area consists of a large lake, approximately half a mile and 2/3 of a mile long. And Nandaji was a very prominent man, and he established a trust called the Manava Dharma. The trust was called Manava Dharma for the purpose of developing that area where Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita. And they had spent like $1.5 million on it already, Nandaji. So it's a lot of money in India, $1.5 million. If you're American, it's quite a lot of money. I mean, for Indian people, the currency at that time, it was a lot of money in 1975. But the money mainly came from the government. So he was quite influential, and he was leading a project there. So the lake looked very impressive, and it was very clean water, and the facilities, the ghats, the bathing places were all very nice. And there was also the Gaudiya Math had a building there also. So this Nandaji, he took Prabhupada around and hoping that Prabhupada will purchase some land. But Prabhupada would have preferred if he donated some land. Let's put it that way. So that was not the case. But anyway, it continues, and then there was and as they walked around, they saw a large statue of this person, Nandaji. That's interesting. Prabhupada. I'm just thinking. I mean, Prabhupada was a pure devotee, and he never put himself forward. As compared to this Nandaji, made a huge statue of himself, and to show that he was the Acharya or the controller there. But Prabhupada is worshipped. He's different. There's a difference between him and Prabhupada. And you'll see as the discussion goes along that there's quite a big difference between the two personalities. One is an ambassador of the spiritual world, and he is an ambassador for philanthropic work, you would say. So then, they had everything was very nicely done, new irrigation system, they designed how to supply the water to the entire district. It was very well organized. There were goshalas, there were Ayurvedic pharmacies, so many different things. So Prabhupada was now taking his massage. He had returned from that walk. And this person, Nandaji, he sat on his chair. And he started talking about his future plans for improving the area. And he was talking about the spiritual values and strengthening the moral and spiritual values, but especially to the young, because he felt that the values of, especially the spiritual values were being eroded by the forces of materialism and atheism. So the conversation actually centered around the Bhagavad Gita, to bring about change. And then, although Nandaji began speaking, Prabhupada took over the conversation and he ended up hearing. So that was really good. Prabhupada took control of the conversation. He was hearing. And then, Prabhupada really got stuck into it. And then he speaks about the Bhagavad Gita, how it must be properly understood and assimilated before it is given to others. Yesterday we were having a discussion, and if you have to just read the verses, you wouldn't understand the inner meaning of the Gita or Lord Krishna. Because Prabhupada's purports are more important than the verse itself. It's definitely more important than the verse itself. And he himself said that his purports are his personal ecstasies. So you can get everything out of the purport. So it has to be thoroughly assimilated. And then Prabhupada speaks about how, and he quotes the fourth verse from the fourth chapter, the first text. Imam Visvita Yogam, Proktavahan Am Avyam, Vivasvan Manava Prabha, Manurikshvaku Abravit. I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god. The sun god instructed to Ikshvaku, or Manu, and Manu to Ikshvaku. Like that, it is coming down in disciplic succession. So he was pointing out that this is how we have to understand the Bhagavad Gita. But this person wasn't thinking that this really happened. It wasn't factual. It is more symbolic. So it was not something that this battle didn't really take place. But Prabhupada was pointing out how Vivashwan actually exists. And they got into discussion. And Prabhupada dived into explaining more deeply, into the Gita, how, we are living entities, we are eternal, and Sarvagata, all pervasive. He was talking of the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He got into that discussion. And then Prabhupada started describing the sun, the moon, and other planets according to Srimad Bhagavatam. So this man was listening. So Nandaji never thought of accepting the Gita he didn't accept it literally. But nevertheless, he continued to listen attentively. That he was doing. But Srila Prabhupada, as Prabhupada was guiding the discussion, and Prabhupada was very expert, he didn't create a controversy, even though the subject matter prompted him to do so, but he didn't do that. He kept things on a very pleasant level. And he encouraged this person to study the Gita because he had retired from politics, and Prabhupada was saying he should take sannyas and preach the message full time. But, renounced order of life is not so easy, right? It easy? Not so easy. So he was a little taken aback. And Hariswari Prabhu described, he was appreciating Prabhupada's total conviction and realization on Bhagavad Gita. How he understood it, and he could quote so many references. And it was very difficult to dispute anything with Prabhupada. It's very difficult because So like that, and he was talking about Indian people, they may be attached to the Vedic way. They may have this understanding, about the Gita a little. But to really accept it and follow it was a little difficult. Because as this man, to literally accept the Gita. But Srila Prabhupada was pointing out that how he was successful in presenting the Bhagavad Gita without, like Sri Krishna is the authority, without any speculation. And therefore it was very effective. And it was changing and transforming people's lives. So then they took lunch and then they went to on a tour to a university. And Prabhupada made certain that his books were left there for further examination. Then Prabhupada returned to the guest house and said goodbye to the host. He declined to give any immediate decision as land purchase, but assured Nandaji that he would be in touch with him in the near future. So Srila Prabhupada was considering, whether we should purchase a land there. And they also, the university was quite impressive. And like we also go to the universities in the last few weeks, we've been going regularly to all these campuses in Durban. And it's so interesting to see how people are embracing this process of Krishna consciousness. So then Prabhupada left this man, and then he goes into another area called, I think it was Jyotisar or something, Jyotisar. And so here this land was, it was a little bit rural. and there was talk that that's where actually the Bhagavad Gita was spoken, in this area. So they drove into this area and they looked and there was a deity of Krishna, marble deity of Krishna and Arjuna. There was a banyan tree that was over 5,000 years old. And Prabhupada walked and he felt, and even the devotees felt, that spiritual vibrancy of the area. And as Hari Suri Prabhu says, a deep sense of timeless wisdom and serenity seemed to permeate the atmosphere. Nicely put. So, and then one of Prabhupada's disciples, Harikesh Prabhu, very succinctly said, the other place that they went to where the man of Nandaji was like heaven, it was like the heavenly planet. But this place where we are now, where the Bhagavad Gita is spoken, it's like Vaikuntha. So it gave a very good understanding of it. And Prabhupada smiled and said, yes, we should build a temple here for Krishna and Arjuna. And that other place, Brahma Sarova, because there were lots of ghats and bathing places, he said we should also build a temple of Krishna, Balram and Subhadra, because they went there during the solar eclipse and they were bathing. It's interesting that how he saw it. And one of the devotees were tasked with the responsibility to do the negotiations for the land with Nandaji. And Prabhupada told him to get the land donated at this Jyotisar, if it's possible. And then Prabhupada remarked, after all this, visiting this place, he said, on the way back, Prabhupada candidly remarked about the Kurukshetra development. They call it Manava Dharma, religious action for humanity. But Prabhupada, it's like quite strong word, he called it Pasu Dharma, animal life. 1.5 crores, that's $1.5 million. 1.5 crores of rupees spent, and they erect big statues for birds to pass stool on, but they have not installed a single deity of Krishna. Like we have our garden here, and this park here, it's called Gandhi Park. Once I was passing there, many birds come and they decorate the Gandhi, but once I saw a beer can there in between them, they put a beer can, and now I see, I think the head is out. The head is out. The head is out. I could talk so much about Gandhi that we can do separately. But the point is, even now, even if you look at that person who created a statue of himself, well, the birds are having a feast, So, like you have, even in the apartheid times, they put Louis Botha and so many Jan Smuts and so many people on statues, and they would clean them with brooms. They would scrub them with municipal brooms. Just think about it. We won't do that. The way we worship the deity, we bathe them with milk and so many different products. So it's different. So that's the point we're going to make there. But then, we'll try to finish because we have less time, yeah. Then, and then again, they returned, and Srila Prabhupada's mail was generally handled by his secretary. So Hansaduta, who was the secretary, was out. So Srila Prabhupada said, Hari Suri should read all the mail. And so then, at that time, also there was one devotee called Pushta Krishna Swami. He also came to South Africa. He's a surgeon actually. And he was having plans to buy Mercedes-Benz and from Germany and send it to India. Different devotees had different projects. Some people wanted to go preaching in Poland, And then Gopi Paranadana Prabhu, he was translating the Sri Chaitanya Shikshamrita. And there were several other letters as well. There were many letters. So just when, just as Prabhupada was finishing his reading, Harikesh came in shocked to see me reading Prabhupada's mail. So he started chastising him. He didn't realize that Prabhupada gave him permission. So he was chastising him. And he didn't say anything. And Srila Prabhupada was present and he didn't say a word either. He merely stood very quietly. And so, but Harikesh Prabhu, he was emphasizing his point. And he was saying, if Brahmananda was here, you would never get away with this. So after he cooled off, then Harisuri Prabhu explained that actually the approval was given by Prabhupada for me to read the mail. So the thing is, you have to notice how Prabhupada dealt with it. He kept quiet because the one person was totally off and he had given the approval. And we can learn from that how to deal in conflict situations, how to respond. And Prabhupada stayed quiet because he probably wanted Harikesh to get the realization that it was authorized. And this quite happens. And another instance when there was once in Bombay, Vishaka and other disciples were with Prabhupada on Juhu, and Prabhupada was giving some money to some beggars. And she said, Prabhupada, what are you doing? This is Krishna's money. This is Krishna's money. So Prabhupada stayed quiet also in that instance. And as she was going, she realized that she must have offended Prabhupada, and she had this realization. But it's good that she had the realization. She came to that realization, well, Prabhupada is giving this money, it's like prasad to the beggars. She got this realization and she told Prabhupada, and Prabhupada accepted. So he gave then, that chance probably for him to figure it out. He stayed quiet. But then, he exploded. And it's dangerous, sometimes we may feel that we're very senior to others and we may have, authority over others, but the way you should deal with others is we have to be very careful. You may be senior, you may be, sometimes we take the lamp, we're passing it around, we think, who's more senior? Hey, I'm older than that person. I'm more senior. That thought comes up. Actually, it's not recommended that, at least to the Swami we should offer it first, maybe the sannyasi, and all others we should just go from one side doing it. Because there's so many factors to take into account. We live in a country that, there's so much of dissension and apartheid, and so many, we come from apartheid times, even it's still existing in many ways. So it may look, it may not be, you may just miss one person and go to that person and say, but why are you going to him and then coming to me? So that has to be taken into account also. So therefore, we have to come to a higher realization on how we apply rules, regulation, and principles. So anyway, that was said, but Prabhupada wanted to engage everybody in service. Although he may not have been qualified, but still Prabhupada engaged him. And then it kind of ends, and after a few minutes of silence, in the gentle darkness, as I carefully massaged his legs and feet, he softly asked me how I liked the idea of having a temple at Jyotisar. I said, yes, it would be very nice. He smiled and replied, yes, Krishna spoke his Bhagavad Gita. Then he closed his eyes and went to sleep. So this is where that day ends. It's very interesting because the Bhagavad Gita, there's a although this person didn't have that amount of faith, but you can see how Prabhupada dealt with him in such a loving way, and in another pastime that was in Bombay with Giriraj Swami, there was a man, who was a wild man. He was like kind of young American hooligan. So he came to the stage. He was like had tattoos and chains hanging. I don't know. You know how these people are. Very aggressive mood. And he wanted to challenge Prabhupada. So immediately Prabhupada's disciple rushed to stop him. But Srila Prabhupada surprised all of them and said, no, let him come on the stage. So the person came on the stage and Prabhupada said, give him a cushion and then give him the microphone. And then he said, this young hooligan said, he asked Prabhupada, have you realized yourself within yourself? And Srila Prabhupada said, yes. And the young man was taken aback. So he raised the question, how old is Bhagavad Gita? And Prabhupada said, 5,000 years old. Then the young man began to spout, no, according to my authorities, Bhagavad Gita is 2,000 years old. And Prabhupada said, that is nonsense. He was quite, yeah. Then the young man asked another challenging question. And then Prabhupada finally said, you answer my question. What is the process for learning the Bhagavad Gita? What is the process? And the man is saying, no, I asked you first, you answer my question. So there was backward and forward. And Prabhupada said, no, I'm not your servant, I don't have to answer your question. So then, so what is the process of understanding the Bhagavad Gita? Although they were like shouting and then Prabhupada motioned to the disciple to take him off the stage. Then Prabhupada proceeded to explain the process of receiving the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. How do you receive it? With submission and oral reception, not by challenging. And then there was like a whole, the groups were polarized. Some people were thinking, well, Prabhupada should have answered the man's question. And some were thinking, well, the young man should be respectful to Prabhupada. And it was, why did Prabhupada do this in front of like 20,000-30,000 people? That's a huge crowd. He did this just to illustrate that to learn the Bhagavad Gita, the real process is one must be submissive to hearing it from the authority. That's why. So much can be said. I was going to, which Happa said, we have meant to stop now. But there's so much can be said about how to accept the Gita, why, Prabhupada's Gita is so effective, because it's coming in disciplic succession. There's a whole dialogue, there's a whole discussion given by Giriraj Maharaj in his book from I'll Build You a Temple, the Juhu story. You can read more about it. This in his book. So we'll take any questions or comments. Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions or comments on what I just said, or like to say something? Anybody? There's a microphone there. Would like to add or correct me in some things or whatever it is? Pushpaveli, would like to say anything? Ujwala? Matajis? Okay. So we'll conclude here. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.